Welcome back to Music Kingdom. In this video we are listening to, giving a music theory breakdown for, and reviewing Bad Habit by Steve Lacy from his June sophomore album, Gemini Rights. Hang tight. Hey music lovers, my name is Francis. If you'd like to support the work I put into these videos, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support the channel further, you'll find Music Kingdom's Patreon and other affiliate links in the description below. Alright, now before we give the song a listen, before we give it a music theory breakdown, and before we review it ultimately arriving at a score, let's first talk about Bad Habit by Steve Lacy. Bad Habit by Steve Lacy is the second single from his sophomore album released back in June titled Gemini Rights, and yes, I had to be sure and check. He is a Gemini. The song specifically is of the R&B funk pop lo-fi genre and was a mainstream breakthrough for Lacy. Not only was it his first chart entry in the US, it also peaked at #1, and get this, I had to write it down because it's a lot to remember. It became the first song to ever top the Hot R&B hip hop songs, Hot R&B songs, and Hot Rock and Alternative Song charts simultaneously. So yes, while it isn't his first album, with this being his sophomore album, he has officially arrived at the scene. Bad Habit is written and produced by Steve Lacy himself and 4 other people, being Diana Gordon, John Kirby, Britanny Fousheé, and Matthew Castellanos. And while I realize this channel is still small, if you have been subscribed and have seen some of my other videos, you'll know I usually have some bone to pick when there's a lot of people involved in a particular song. I'm partial to when it's either just that artist or maybe a collaborative effort of the artist and someone else. However, I do care less when the result or the product they create is very impressive and respectable. So let's find out if it is, and be sure to stick around after the song for a music theory breakdown, and then we're gonna review it and give it an overall score.
Wanted me, I wish I knew. I wish I knew you wanted me. I wish I knew. I wish I knew you wanted me. What you ooh,
Gets right to it.
made a move, could've made a move. If I knew I'd be with you. I bite my tongue, it's a bad habit.
Great production out of the gate.
Kinda mad that I didn't take a stab at it. It's okay, things happen for reasons that I think are sure, yeah. I wish I knew you wanted me. I wish I knew.
I love the layers of production going on.
You wanted me. I wish I knew you wanted me. Say to me.
Very nice. There's a certain tastefulness to it.
Would you mind if I tried to make a pass at it? Now you're not too good for me, my dear. Funny you come back to me, my dear.
There's a sense of regret,
It's okay,
but there's playfulness too.
reasons that I can't ignore, yeah.
He has a nice voice, but not the nicest voice.
I wish I knew you wanted me. You can't surprise a Gemini. I'm everywhere, I'm cross-sighted. Now that you're back, I can decide if I decide if you're invited. You always knew the way to wow me. Fuck around, get tongue-tied. I turn it on, I make it rowdy, then carry on, but I'm not hiding. You grabbing me hard.
This is a nice
'cause you
bridge.
know what you found is biscuits, it's gravy bag.
Oh. That change. Production totally shifted. What a beat. Oh my god. I already like the song, but it just transformed.
It's biscuits, it's gravy bag. 'Cause you know it's biscuits,
And the lyrics have changed a bit as well. The tone.
let's fuck in the back of the mall. Lose control, go stupid, go crazy, babe. I know
Wow. Initial thoughts. It was a nice song in the first half, like nice enough for a car ride to play lounging around your house and to enjoy listening to. It is a nice song. It had a fresh production, nice layers in the production. It didn't feel very generic by any means. And then after the bridge, or I guess beginning at the bridge, the song absolutely went into a brand new direction. Yes, sounding similar enough, but the beat completely shifted. And all of a sudden the production, which I already liked enough, became very artistic and sophisticated, and it felt much more inspired in the second half, as well as correlating with lyrics in a sense too. They kind of changed up, and his attitude kind of changed with the transition of the beat. So that left me with fabulous impression. But I'll save the rest of my thoughts for when I'm spreading the song apart into different categories, ultimately giving it a song score. And before I can do that, let's jump to the expert's corner to hear his music theory breakdown and his take.
Welcome to the Experts Corner. This is Bad Habit by Steve Lacy. This song is in the time signature of 4/4 and it's in the key of A flat major. Now musically, this song has a lot of pretty cool stuff going on. The chord progressions are pretty unique, and the chords themselves, almost all of them have some kind of cool extension to them that gives them a nice, almost jazzy feel. Let me show you. The main progression starts on the 4, that's D flat major, but it's got a major 7 in it. D flat major 7. Then it goes to the 1, A flat major, also with a major 7. Then B flat minor 7. Then A flat over C, or A flat first inversion. That's when the 3rd is in the bass. And that kind of leads us back up to the start of the progression again. So it repeats that for about the first half of the song, and then in the latter half it switches it up a bit. So we have F minor 7, B flat minor 7, E flat major with a dominant 7, C minor 7, an A flat major, D flat major 7, repeat that D flat major 7, and then C dominant 7. That's a cool flavor. So I just listened to this song for the first time today, and to be honest with you, it's the first I've ever even heard of Steve Lacy. But I was pleasantly surprised. I love the retro vibe, the nice chords, the unique progressions. The whole package was put together very nicely. There are a couple things I'm taking off for, one of them being his singing voice. Now to be fair, this is the only Steve Lacy song I've ever heard, and there may be other songs where he showcases his vocals better. But in this one I just got the impression he's not the best singer. He's a little pitchy, his tone isn't anything great. Secondly, I would just say the song's a bit too repetitive. Now I don't need a song to be crazy and never repeat itself, but in this one you have that first half where it just hits you over and over again with the same thing, and then the second half, which is different, but then that repeats over and over again. I feel like after a little while I can just fade it out myself, like I've got the idea. Overall though, good song, I did enjoy it, and I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10. Back to you, Francis.
A very special thank you to our musical expert for breaking down the song and giving us his score of a 6.5 out of 10. And now it's time to break the song apart into various categories, grade them each, and arrive at an overall song score. Starting out with composition specifically, Bad Habit for me gets a 6 out of 10. The reason being, if we are just talking about composition specifically and we're not acknowledging other components of a song, it is pretty middle of the road. You know, it would be probably a 4 or a 5 simply because it doesn't really go places in terms of either its time signatures. The way it's structured is rather simple and well fit for the radio or mainstream success. It's nothing incredibly artistic. That being said, how the bridge segues into the final minute or so of the song does count as composition. It's how it's structured and composed. So for that, which I personally found very impressive, I'm gonna bump it up a bit more than a 4 or a 5, which is why I'm landing on a 6. Moving on to production, I'm especially excited to review this component of the song, which I am giving a very strong 8 out of 10. Reason being, for the majority of the song before it shifts, as mentioned, it is a fine production. It's not necessarily too generic. There are nice layers and colors, if you will, and thoughtfulness and deliberate choices to make it a bit more complex than a lot of music that exists today, especially newer music. So I would already give the song probably a 6 or a 7, which is above average for what it is throughout the majority of the song. And not to be redundant, but once it transitions and the beat absolutely changes, something you'll learn if you end up following the videos on this channel is I am a sucker for a good beat. They are hard to come by. It was just our last video, I was reviewing Drake and 21 Savage Major Distribution, and I was not very nice to that song. I was called a colonizer, among other things. It probably rubbed people the wrong way, but it's just not a good song. The beat was very generic, and this song is not that. Back to the point, this song has a very fresh, original, and artistic beat and groove. And not just that, but in the latter half of the song, in addition to the beat change, there are added layers and complexities to the production as well, giving it a beautiful atmosphere and a beautiful mood. So I'm a bit high on that. So while I would give it a 6 or a 7, that's why I'm bumping it up to an 8, simply for that. And sometimes songs are as great as their best parts, and for me, this is one of them. The beat kind of reminds me of a relatively obscure Michael Jackson song called 2000 Watts, which I love Michael Jackson. It is not a very good song, but the beat in that song is disgusting. And the beat in the latter half of this song reminded me of that, which is a very good thing. So I feel very happy to give it an 8 out of 10. Up next, the category is lyrics, which I'm giving a healthy 6.5 out of 10. Reason being, they are relatable. They are, I wouldn't say generic necessarily, but I mean, most songs have to do in some way, shape, or form with the subject of love, and especially love lost or regret or reminiscing on something of the past. So it's not necessarily new in that regard. However, I do like the playfulness of the lyrics. I do like the authenticity of the lyrics. I think just because it's relatable and comparable to a lot of other lyrics, it still has its own flavor that feels real. It doesn't feel necessarily like you're listening to something that was just copy and pasted lyrically speaking. In addition to that, the reason I wouldn't give it a 5, which is pretty mediocre, the reason I bump it up to a 6.5 is because in the latter half of the song, the lyrics do change a little bit in their mood, in their tone. They perhaps get a bit more playful, they get a bit more just happy in general, and I think that's cool because I love when the lyrics match a certain change in music and they change with it. So I thought that was very well done, enough for me to bump it up to a 6.5. Keeping it moving, let's talk about vocals, which unfortunately for me were the low part of the song. I don't want to say that Steve Lacy is necessarily a bad singer. I would just say that it wasn't a very strong vocal performance. I think of all the aspects of this song that make it great, it's not necessarily one of them, and that's okay. You know, you don't need to be an amazing singer. You don't need to deliver to all of us a remarkable vocal performance in order for a song to be good. Absolutely not. So that's why I'm kind of at peace with it, and I feel it's fair to give it a 4.5 out of 10, simply because it's not a bad vocal, which would be a 1, 2, or 3, nor is it anything necessarily to write home about. So 4.5 is not an insult in my opinion. I'm not hating, but keeping it objective, that's what I feel it deserves. Arriving at our final category of originality and or inspiration, I'm giving the song a 7 out of 10, which surprised even myself because in the first several listens, I felt it wasn't necessarily very original or inspired. On surface level, when I was new to it, it kind of just felt like something suited for the radio, something that is pretty simple and basic and catchy and good, don't get me wrong, but it didn't necessarily feel very artistic or creative until I listened more and more and more, and then the different intricacies and nuances of the song began to really stand out to me, and I felt how fresh it actually was and how original and inspired it turned out to be. So I was inclined early on to probably give its originality and inspiration middle of the road 4 or 5, as I would with a lot of these categories before I got more connected to it. But yes, in the end, I felt that the playfulness of the lyrics, albeit they weren't necessarily super original to begin with, but fresh enough and playful enough, that's a bonus point. The composition, while simple as mentioned, has that shift later in the song. I find that to be original and inspired. And of course, the beat that I praised, you can never, diss a good beat. Good beats are always going to be original and inspired, in my opinion. So all in all, 7 out of 10 is good, not great, but good. Definitely better than bad or mediocre. So yeah, I mean, for what it is, I find it to be a relatively good, original, and inspired song. So in my opinion, well deserving of a 7. Add it all up, throw in the expert score, and average it out. Bad Habit by Steve Lacy from the sophomore album Gemini Rights gets a 6.4 out of 10. In my opinion, after running the numbers and seeing that it's a 6.4, that was a bit lower than I was kind of hoping it would be, even though I'm the one grading it, because it kind of seems like an insult or like it's too low, given how much I do enjoy the song. But then I'm kind of reminded, you know, if I'm bringing in perspective of some of the best songs to ever exist in the history of music being 8s, 9s, and 10s, and the worst songs in the history of music being 1s, 2s, and 3s, then with that perspective in mind, a 6.5 is respectable, it is fair, and in my opinion, it's not me hating, it's not me being rude, it's acknowledging that the song is pretty good. And I find it funny that it's 1/10 off of what the expert gave it as well with his overall score. So there you have it. It's a good song. It's a good album. Steve Lacy has arrived at the scene. I'm happy for him. I'm excited to hear more of his future work. As always, let me know in the comments below if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, and of course, what other songs by your favorite artists you would like for this channel to review next. As mentioned, if you'd like to support the work I put into these videos, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support the channel even further, you'll find Music Kingdom's Patreon and other affiliate links in the description below. This has been another edition of Music Kingdom. Thank you so much for listening with me, and I look forward to jamming with you in the next one.